Coin traders, how we doing? Thanks for joining me for the show looking at Vechain VET on that ticker. Been a couple weeks since we have talked about it and a lot of uncertainty right now in the crypto space, but just specifically want to look at kind of the current setup for Vechain right now because it's not necessarily the best right now and kind of a lot of uncertainty in this overall area as well. So kind of a lot of bearish signs here, but we know that we could see a flip just based on the rest of the crypto space, and Bitcoin also looking a little bit more bullish as well. And so especially with seeing the passing of the ETF for Ethereum here, we are expecting a little bit more rally here out of the altcoin space, but overall right now, a lot of things to be looking at for Vechain and a lot of things on this chart we actually need to see change. And so specifically right now, ever since the middle of May, we've been looking at kind of this more or less inverse parabolic pattern here, where we've actually started to see kind of a sort of change in trend, a little bit of a period where we were actually thinking that things were looking good here with a lot of these lower highs, higher low, higher high, and then now pulling back, setting a new lower low, and then additionally a new lower high, as well as getting stuck up in this big resistance zone here in between these EMAs. So big resistance point in between the 26 and 50 period EMA. So before that, though, we were actually looking at big resistance coming in by the 12 period and then also getting stuck up in between the 12 and 26. So big resistance finally flipped and looking at the 26, broke that. And now we will be looking at the 50, but still a big resistance zone here in between the 26 and 50, especially after right now starting to set up for a pretty otherwise bleak looking chart here. Now, so like we said, if we actually zoom in on this part of the chart here, one of the things that was actually in favor for the bulls here is that we had a little bit of consolidation in sideways, or excuse me, inside bars here, and then ultimately had this very nice bullish candle breakout, followed by another bullish engulfing candle here, pulling back, setting this higher low, and then this very, very nice bullish candle here. So that was looking extremely good for the bulls, especially with these three bodies of these three bearish candles here, fitting well inside the body of one bullish candle. So despite the fact that we actually pulled down in price, and for the low of this bullish candle, we were looking at a low of 0.03362 compared to a low on this current candle low of 0.03359. So barely put in a new lower low, but nonetheless still a low of price. But obviously with that, a following inside bar broke bullish, and then now putting in the next lower high coming in. So the previous high that we were looking at was actually up at 0.03751 compared to the high that we actually saw a lower high come in, 0.03725. So substantial difference there, and then obviously now pulling back to actually test this overall level. So more or less still a sideways zone, but it's still more or less favoring a little bit more of that bearish action. And so additionally, one of the things we are looking at here is that if we actually look at this daily setup, one of the things that's been very apparent is kind of this nice rising trend line that ultimately did see a pretty big close, especially after kicking off of the resistance points. So since we've gotten multiple tests and attempts of this trend line, we do know that it is extremely relevant here and that it has been playing into effect as very nice support, which does mean high likelihood, especially after confirming a test of resistance on this level, that pretty much we are going to run up and see this price as a resistance. But the good thing about that is that it's a rising trend line instead of a falling trend line here. So does mean that price still can rally, still maintaining resistance on it. So really the big kickers are going to be the exponential moving average resistances and then also the price levels up ahead. So we're looking at big closing levels for resistance coming in at 0.03685. Below that, we are going to be looking at about 0.03664. And then following that to the upside, we would be looking at 0.03734. So a lot of upside to gain in order to actually start changing this trend and seeing higher highs. Big thing right now, though, is just going to be holding lower levels of support. And since we're already kind of breaking the previous level at about 3.425, do need to see a lot more upside pressure to actually start to test back some of these higher upside resistance levels would be the great thing and great sign. Now, do want to flip over into the 2-day time frame and 2-day chart right now, specifically just to look at kind of the current pattern, because believe it or not, the daily time frame doesn't necessarily give as clear of a picture as the 2-day and even the weekly, which we'll get to here in a second. So one of the things that we actually need to be extremely aware of in this type of setup, and we're actually going to close and turn off the 50 period EMA just because this highlights even more just the resistance in between the zone of the 12 and 26 EMAs that we've seen multiple times already. So very strong and effective resistance level, especially after not retracing and seeing that significant of a move to the upside. So for example, from the low here where we were looking at, we were coming in a low right around 3252 up to the current little mini trend high, only about a 15% gain. And yet meanwhile, from the trend high, we're actually looking at a pullback for a Vechain of about 40%, which is still pretty good for the rest of the crypto space because a lot of altcoins have seen 50 to 60% retracements on this most recent move here. But still, nonetheless, the fact that we have seen overall about 3 weeks worth almost of just more or less sideways trading, only getting to about a 15% gain from the low, is just a pretty bad sign, especially when we look at getting stuck up at these big resistance points. And then in addition, we also have several big key resistance levels in terms of price, because we're looking at a big point, which we saw previous support at, big previous support, flipped it and found big resistance. And then now once again, coming down into the big resistance zone here right at 3665. So as you can see, still points of low price support, found a lot of support for this wick. A little bit of support here, and then obviously in this instance, resistance, and resistance. So very strong resistance zone up overhead, especially comparing and factoring in the exponential moving averages, as well as these overall price levels and zones here. Now, if we do zoom out a little bit and we look at the previous move, you can see that the current price is kind of setting right along where we actually had a big point of support back on the previous trend. So pretty much from the end of December up until the start of the year, we had a very big, nice price support point, pretty much right where we're at right now. And then below that would be a very big previous resistance point that we were looking at, which does come in at 3268. And as you can see, big point of resistance here, which also flipped into a very nice price level support. So big support as well for that overall level. If we do look below that, then we're pretty much going to be looking at prices hitting about 3083. And this is probably actually a realistic target because especially if we draw a trend line for support on this overall move ever since we actually did hit our current trend high in the middle of February, you can see that we've been maintaining support on this trend line and back testing it the whole time. So even if we do see a run down to this level, probably would pair with about the 3083 level fairly nicely, and that would be a good downside target to actually look at. And still, that would be maintaining a longer term trend high, which is exactly what we do and want to see. And so let's go ahead and clean this up for a little bit. Even if, for example, we look at a Fibonacci retracement from the previous low to the current swing high, then we're actually looking at still having a pretty good support line on top of and pretty much right around the 786 Fibonacci retracement level here if we do get down to that point. So Fibonacci retracement does come in right around the 3143 level. So that would be pretty much my downside target if we do end up breaking the 3300 or 3306 support levels, which I am kind of expecting right now based on a lack of volume and a lack of breaking through a lot of these upside resistance points. But like we said, we are still trying to be reliant on the rest of the crypto space and finding some bullish upside here, especially after some nice bullish news where we did have the Ethereum ETF approval. Pulling up a technical really quick on the 2-day chart, want to look at stochastic RSI. So right now we were pretty much right around the 80 line, looking at that nice bearish cross right now. And last time we did have a bearish cross pretty much right around or on top of the 80 line. We did see a top come in and also a lot of downside pressure from there as this oscillator cycled to the downside below the 20 line. So we could actually end up seeing a lot more downside pressure based on the stochastic RSI here. So after finding resistance, we could see a lot more downside pressure, just like we said, down to that lower support target right around the $3,300 level. Or excuse me, we wish, right? The 0.03100 level. Okay, so now flipping over here into the weekly chart really quick before we wrap up, just because I do want to point out how for the last 4 to 5 weeks, we actually have been defending the 26 period EMA, but that also comes at a cost after defending the 12 period and confirming it very nicely on multiple weeks until finally losing it here and then relying on the 26 period, which is still a very good sign as long as we do find exponential moving averages to still maintain support at. And if we can look, we can see an overall decrease in the amount of bearish volume and selling pressure. So even if we do get a little bit more pullback to the 0.03100 level, we could still expect a little bit more of an opportunity to actually see at that point some more volume coming in, and probably that would be about the lowest, especially since we are seeing a decrease in overall selling pressure for Vechain VET. Now, if we actually want to look at technicals for this weekly chart here, if we actually want to start off looking at stochastic RSI first, well below the 20 line here, and obviously in a very good spot to try to see a nice bullish cross. Could still sit in the current area a little bit right around the 2 to 3 line here before finally finding some upside move. But we know that at some point it definitely is coming on this longer term chart. It's just kind of a matter of when, and I think ultimately when we do bottom, we'll see a very nice upside move, especially maintaining this very nice longer term uptrend. So now also want to look at the RSI as well, because although we have been seeing lower highs in this RSI and actually pulling back and still sitting below the moving average for this RSI, we are still pretty much right around the 50 line now, which is where we do like retracing to before we actually see the next leg and move to the upside. So especially another little move to our downside support targets could actually have this RSI reset and allow for a very nice opportunity to see the price to just run a lot higher on top of the current high right now for the trend, which comes in at 5499. Run right into the 4-hour chart here before we wrap up, and pretty much just want to look at this major support line, which does need to hold in order for the bulls to have pretty much any hope right now of starting to see any sort of upside gain. So price level for that coming in at 0.03412. And as you can see right now, trying to defend it very much, also been clearly defended several times, and then also big point of resistance and then support as well. Up above that, we got several levels of closing support. Next major one is going to be resistance coming in right at 3458 though. So big opportunity. And so essentially right now we do have the most important line right at 3412. And so essentially if we do see a break and close below the support line, we are going to be running down to test the lower level of support, which we're going to be looking at 2 of those 4. Coming in right at 3329 and then 3303. So from that point, we pretty much would be expecting this level to hold and then actually see a rally to the upside move. But if that zone also does fall, then we are going to be looking at a lot lower prices and probably shooting down to about the 3-cent level overall for a Vechain. So overall, it's not totally lights out for the Vechain bulls, but we do have a lot of work to do and a lot of struggle points up overhead to actually break in order to see a continued upside move, especially because we also have an extremely relevant trend line that we're also looking at and fighting to the downside. So we already broke the rising support line for a trend line here, but also we could see a lot more upside, but that is going to align with a lot of the price levels as well as the exponential moving averages. So a lot of opportunity and volume needed for the bulls here to actually rally up and break through. But the good news and the good sign is that most of the selling pressure and volume coming in over the last few weeks has been overall pretty minimal, just as the bull volume has been minimal as well. So plenty of opportunity and an opportunity for the bulls to actually rally up and see that break. But that is exactly what we need to see. Status quo right now, still pretty much very much in the bearish favor. Looking at some support levels to the downside is going to be our target. And yeah, so with that, that is going to go ahead and wrap up the show today for Vechain VET on that ticker. Hope you all enjoyed. If you did, please hit the thumbs up, like, and subscribe if you have not done so just yet. If you do have any questions, comments, issues, disagreements, all that fun stuff, definitely drop me a note down in the comments sections below. Do love getting back to each and every one of you. Also, don't forget to reach out and follow me over on Twitter or X at coin_trades is the handle over there. Do appreciate all the continued love and support as always. Does mean so much. Stay safe, coin traders. Take care, and I'll catch you back in the next video.